We're going to have what's called, I suppose, a fireside chat now, talking about business transformation and some of the sort of challenges that Fresenius Medical Care and opportunities that you guys are working through. And hopefully, again, we'll get into a bit of Q&A, a bit of back and forth with everyone. So, but before that, I'll let you introduce yourself, Subeer.
Sure. Thanks, James. So, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Subeer Sakssena. I'm the Vice President for Enterprise Solutions with Fresenius Medical Care. Fresenius Medical Care is a company that's based completely, the entire business is based on renal care or nephrology. So essentially, the company is into making of medical devices. So we make the machines that do the dialysis, and then we also have a huge global network of clinics that do the dialysis themselves. So like, there's both B2B and B2C kind of a setup in the company. So B2B because obviously we're selling devices to hospitals and providers and running our own clinics as well. And then B2C because of the end touch point that we have with almost 500,000 people that we basically support and get them to live a full life every day. These are all essentially people with chronic kidney disease, needing dialysis support. So it's a lot into really touching and improving the life of the patients that we serve. So that's really the motto, to make the life of these patients better every day. So that's what the company is all about. It's a fairly substantially large company by itself. It's more than 100,000 employees globally. Multiple factories where we're kind of manufacturing, and then 4,000 clinics that we have across the globe, with the biggest number of that in US, almost 2,600 of them in US. So we're number one player in the dialysis sector, and then also number one player in dialysis machine manufacturing, which is very complicated if you think about it. It's literally like a kidney outside of the body, which is cleaning your blood and injecting it back in. So we're here to support our patients and to be able to drive. Healthcare life sciences is not a new sector for me. Prior to being with Fresenius, which is what I've been with them for the last 18 months, so I joined them in March of last year. I was with Novartis Pharmaceuticals for 20 years before that, in various capacities, with the first 10 years based out of India, became the head of IT for India, and then moved over to Ireland in 2014, and eventually was the head of IT in Ireland before I decided to start my journey with Fresenius. So held a couple of different hats and different responsibilities, but that kind of really hooked me into the healthcare life sciences and pharmaceutical space. So hence the journey and the decision to continue moving forward with Fresenius. And glad to be here and sharing my journey and sharing more about what Fresenius is into, and as my role as VP Enterprise Solutions, the kind of things that we work in, and give you my insights on transformation.
Great stuff, and great to have you. And I suppose the kind of context for the organization, for the conversation is transformation, mm-hmm. right? And the organization moving from sort of traditional maybe ways of doing things to sort of more current ways right. of doing things. Like, is there a particular project that kind of, or like the sort of journey that you guys have been on?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think one of the things about Fresenius as a global organization, it was very regional. And so, a couple of years back, we were highly US versus rest of the world, or even between that, Asia Pacific and Latin America and EU. So it was, different P&Ls, different systems, lack of coordination and connection that we had. So one of the things that we did way back in 2022, because we didn't necessarily have some of the other pharma companies had an amazing run in terms of COVID and what they were able to kind of provide as support and vaccines, etc. Unfortunately for companies like Fresenius, where most of our patients are already immunocompromised because they're going through a lot of medication, we did not have the best years during that time frame, and we had to completely pivot our model into going for more home dialysis rather than clinic-based dialysis, because you can get the patients over. And then we also unfortunately lost a large number of our patients because of COVID and what it did to people who were immunocompromised. So that led to overall umbrella model, or a program that we have, which is known as FME25. And the whole program is about transforming us to become much more agile, much more responsive, looking at what the customers require, and then us becoming global. So that's where we've kind of started to collapse and become a global entity and move away from the regional setup, which is easier said than done. I mean, it's been last 30, 40, 50 years of those regional setups and structures to move them into one global organization and still be able to be much more customer responsive, agile and transformational is a huge deal. So we had to obviously also support the investor community. We owe it a lot to our shareholders as well to ensure that they get the best value out of the company. So it's a lot about what can we look to do, what markets do we want to be in, where can we kind of go behind margins and improve the margins that we have while still continue to holding on to our core ethics. So that's a lot of the stuff that's been going on in an overall program that we know as FME 25.
Okay.
And closer to what you practice then, it's a lot about moving away from typically now coming down to pure IT and programs in the way we deliver it, moving away from traditional waterfall into more agile-based way in which we deliver.
And I think there's been some people in the room who've looked at scaled agile framework and big scale agile things. Have you gone down that route of kind of implementing a methodology, or are you doing it more sort of piecemeal?
So it's been an interesting journey, and maybe this is one of the elements in terms of how do we go about transforming our methodology of delivery, which is easier said than done because, again, waterfall has been there for decades. And we know, okay, very clear handover points between one stage to the next stage in terms of what needs to be done. Business is like, okay, this is what I expect from you. We also know, okay, this is what we are. We engaging with our suppliers in a fixed bid. So we give away a specific scope of work and we get them to do it in a certain price point. With Agile comes a huge difference in the way we go about delivering it. And what we did is we started with our CIO becoming the biggest champion for Agile. And he ensured that it was a topic that was being there in the management board level globally. That we want to kind of move towards more Agile because it's not just about the IT change. Moving to Agile is a business change more than just a technology change. And that's where we're saying the business needs to be much more clear about you guys have product owners, process owners. Do you know where your value is coming from? What are your key differentiators as a company with the rest of your competitors so that you can look to develop that as a multi-year ongoing program or a project that you will support as a product. So it's really starting from the voice from the top, and that's what we started. We then have obviously the scaled agile, so the safe methodology is what we also use, but we do it tailored. So we don't go specifically to how the methodology is stated, but we tailor it to our requirements to ensure that that's fit for purpose and fit for need. So we've done a lot of that. We also, the next thing that we did beyond the voice of the CIO with the board, which was a very key input, was essentially to set up what we call the Agile Program Office, or the APO. And we got in a couple of nice Agile coaches to be part of that journey right from start, because you cannot necessarily start taking those steps without business being educated, trainings being done, people being fully understanding, getting the right tools to come in, and the whole methodology of the fact that you could continue to iterate and not have the perfect aspect right on day one. You could start the journey with an MVP. That's a little bit, people who are like perfect about, okay, I need this down to the last element. It has to be exactly the way I want it. Then it becomes a little challenging. So all of those stakeholders had to be taken through this journey about, how do I engage with you and get you to understand the concept of MVP. It will evolve. You need to be part of the game. You can't just be, okay, I'm giving this to you. Meet me in 6 months and tell me what you've done. You've got to be within that journey with us. And that's the most important, decision point. If you're ever starting an Agile project, and if you do not have a product owner or somebody from the business with you, really question if that's the best way in which you can look to start.
I would actually argue if you're starting any project. I don't necessarily think that only applies to Agile.
Yeah, you could get a sign off and walk away, but in case of Agile, if you do not have a clear product owner and a voice of the customer there constantly with you, you've got to question whether you're starting at the right time. And probably
I think it's a crucial thing, that mindset piece, and it's not just the delivery teams.
That's right.
That need to understand this, right?
That's right.
I always joke when my wife and I got married, we decided that I'm in charge of everything. all of the things I'm in charge of. Apart from decisions, she makes the decisions, but everything else.
Everything else, all the execution is with you.
Yes.
Decisions with her.
But I think that's interesting, right? Because actually, that's what stakeholders want.
Yeah.
Like they want to make the decisions. And although I'm joking, we make some decisions together. Like they do want to be able to get their hands dirty. And actually, if you put it in that context, which is that you've got control. So Agile is handing you control throughout the process, but you need to engage with it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of the trade-off.
Exactly.
When you're selling it to those kind of stakeholders.
And then, another very important element of Agile is servant leadership, both on the business side as well as on the IT side. Many of the managers and most of us don't know what that means, right? What is it to be a servant leader? And, we've had to learn through experience. And fortunately, I've had the opportunity to have driven Agile in a couple of programs and for a few years at Novartis before I moved out, because we were already pivoting into that journey far earlier. So I had learned, the whole progress in terms of what is servant leadership, how you can go about doing it, and was able to impart it to many of these other managers who were kind of facing it for the first time. And, it's the old command and control mechanism that kind of kicks in. And it's like, guys, we've got to take a step back. That's not, what's the whole purpose. Otherwise, they will lock themselves down and you would have let this opportunity go. And it was also about, I'm going to give a specific example here. We're doing a global rollout of SAP Ariba as part of the procurement program. SAP, you hear that, it's completely non-agile. Like, guys, if it's SAP, I'm not doing agile. And we basically said that we do still agile. It's not like, your old world SAP. You need to really start looking at how do we start bringing this in. And the first many months was all about, this is the wrong methodology. We should be doing it, because we know what we need out of it. I don't think so we should go the agile way. And it was always like, hold on, give it time. Give it time. Don't just, press it or throw it out just because you feel that it's not progressing as much, because the first few iterations were very challenging. The first PI that we had when we kind of, did the agile was extremely challenging, and none of the outcomes that we wanted were really coming out of it. We just completed our PI 4 on that program, and when I was there in the PI 2 weeks back in Frankfurt, the product owner stood up and said, we would not have been able to achieve the amount that we've achieved if we were not doing this methodology. If you're not, sticking to it. And I said, listen, I told you, give it time. It's like, because everybody was able to put forward their concerns. We were able to address all the right, issues because people were empowered. They were bringing up their queries. We were being able to prioritize very clearly and being able to decide what do we deliver. Have we delivered everything? No, we've not. But have we delivered something that was considered most valuable to the business? Yes, we have. So from that perspective, I think it was wonderful. It's still a long program. It will go till end of next year. But methodology is no more a question. For the first time in the PI4 event, nobody came up to me and said, methodology is a problem. I had that, in first, second, they were like, in third also, are you sure we don't want to pivot to the old ways of working? But now it's seamless. So that's just an experience in terms of, stick with it. It will be a big change. You obviously have to think through and see when is it relevant. If everything is a cookie cutter approach, maybe agile is not a great way to go about doing it. But if there's a certain aspiration for you to something which is unclear, you want to kind of achieve and grow on it, it's a great methodology. But you have to just fight your way through the fact that you will face a very different methodology that's been at work for the last 50 years, which you're encountering. And you just have to.
I think there's an interesting observation that I've spotted over the last couple of years, which is people talk a lot about culture when you come to transformation, when you talk about kind of AI and some of the things we're talking about here today. And actually, they're like, well, how do you change culture? And for me, culture is just behavior over and over again, right? It's just so, and behavior is easy to change, right? Because you can just change one bit of behavior, right? So run a slightly better meeting. Right? Ask someone what they think. Right? That's behavior. And behavior, and the same applies for skills. Skills are just behavior repeated over time. So if you can start having that mindset shift where actually all we have to do is, I don't know, like have a list of the things that we'd like to work on and maybe prioritize them as to what might be easiest to do first. Just start with something really simple like that. Then over time, you can build out these bigger methodologies.
Yeah.
One of the risks I've seen is a lot of people, if they're doing an agile transformation, they think, oh, agile transformation! And they go in like, ah! we're going to transform the business and it'll be amazing and everything. And all of a sudden everyone gets overwhelmed.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're in a PI session in like Frankfurt and they're like, oh, this is completely different. I'm scared of it. I don't know.
Okay.
And actually no, guys, okay, just a prioritized list. Okay, and what are we going to work on today? Like, let's just start with that and see how it builds. Yeah.
So it's a big change that's driving our methodology, our programs, our interaction with the business and getting them to see value. So we still have many steps to take, like the whole agile financing aspect of it, the capacity, long-term teams that we need to kind of ensure. If we get to that, that'll be great because then your annual struggles for the budget aspect are kind of removed in a way because your capacities are known, your key products in which you want to kind of move forward, your value streams and product lines are clear, and you can start to finance accordingly in that manner. So you're also in a way predictable about how much you're spending as part of your application evolution and spend year on year. So but it's a journey. It's going to take years for us to get to that stage where everything is fully functioning and aligned on agile.
But I think that's a really interesting element. Like when you move from, let's say, a traditional waterfall thing, where your approach, where you're trying to estimate everything and you're allocating budget based on expecting a certain thing to be done, a scope to be delivered in a timeline, across to, okay, hang on a second, we think this is a good place to invest our money, and let's try and get some value out of it over a period of time. All of a sudden, the how much is it going to cost is known. Right? You just know how much it's going to cost because that team for that amount of time.
That's true.
Done.
The capacity.
What you don't know is exactly how much will be finished.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, over time, if you get to that, it'll make the lives of CIOs so much easier because you can predict your future direction, etc. Well, we're facing a different challenge altogether in terms of many of these platform providers and SaaS providers, and like somebody was talking about FinOps, because as we get more and more into cloud with all of these things, other challenges that come in. But hopefully this is not a challenge moving forward. But yeah, you have to just go through a journey.
That's it. So I'm going to open again, as we've been doing all day, to the floor for some questions, and let's have a chat about kind of transformation and kind of maybe some of the environments, different industries people are working in. I think there's a couple of microphones there, so save me running around. Actually, yeah, maybe Lindsay, you could, or Jenny. Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Want to go first? Who's up first? I don't know. Oh, no.
I have my own mic. Okay. Hi, Subeer. My question was, you mentioned that you had like a regional model, and now you have to do like a globalized model.
That's right. Yeah.
So I presume there are a lot of silos that you had to break, doing standardization and everything.
That's right.
What would you advise for someone who is in a business where there are a lot of silos? How do you sort of break those barriers, considering you're not the one calling the shots?
Yeah. So I think the way we kind of do it is more from an IT side of thing being influencers, because many of these decisions are not necessarily IT driving those silos or the removal of silos, but really more from a business perspective. I'm going to give you an example right now that's happening. It is a silo, would probably continue to be a silo, but where technology is probably going to come in and break that silo, right? So we've got, and I've seen this in many companies, so probably what I'm saying is not going to be unique. You've got this US versus the rest of the world kind of a setup that we always have. And we've got one technology set which runs in US. That's not the technology set, also because of the affordability of that solution, which can run in my smaller markets in the rest of the world, right? So the rest of the world has pivoted to a very different solution stack from what's there in US. And both these business teams are kind of engaging with each other saying, you pivot over to this, and the other one is like, okay, now that we're being forced to become one global, which is the one that's going to win? And from an IT perspective, my feedback to them is, guys, this is basically for you to try and resolve, but we can resolve it for you in a different way. Stick with the stacks that you're used to. There's no need for you to kind of become one. But what you need to align on yourself on are your data structures. Align those, because if you do that, I can converge both of them into a common data repository and give you all the AI and insights and details that you need, rather than you needing to change your full stack. And that's eventually one of the directions that they've started to pick up on, is like, okay, maybe the silos are there for a reason, because it's probably fit for a market. That's a technology silo, but we can also break it up and give the global team what they need by trying to get the data and analytics aspects integrated so that you can still have those insights.
So creative problem solving. right?
Yeah.
Seeing if you can find a different way around the challenge.
That's one way to achieve it. The other obviously is you have to influence a top-down business side decision, which takes time because it's pretty political in the way things are set up at times.
So I'll give you another idea, right? Which is I think relationships and silos happen all over the company, right? And if and you can break them down in lots and lots of different ways. So I had this problem at CPL where there was a team up in another part of the country and they just weren't engaged. So I said, right, I need to go meet with at the top level, the CEO of that business, but I also allocated like a manager level and a junior grad level and said, just a quick conversation in a one-to-one, right, I want you to get to know Ron, right, and I want you to go and get to know Mary, and I want you meeting each other regularly, right, and just having a chat and understanding things. And that human approach to breaking down a silo, not necessarily going to break down the silo, but then when you're doing a brainstorming session, you invite Ron and you invite Mary, and they might come because they know that other person is going to be there, and all of a sudden they're now in the room when that thing gets discussed, instead of being on the outside throwing rocks at it. So 1,000 tiny little things can help, as well as the top level big decision stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Blake.
Hey guys, how you doing? Subeer, you had mentioned the transformation journey and working with finance, right? So we've all, on the transformation journey, we all run into that obstacle as well. Can you expand on your experience with finance and how you overcame that or are overcoming?
Well, we haven't overcome that. It's still something we're working on. And they have their reasons because they have to kind of, project in a certain way. They need to kind of, be definite about, the OPEX, CAPEX split and stuff like that. And you don't know all of this stuff when you're kind of, working on the agile aspect of it, right? So what we've tried to do, at least on that specific aspect, is try and work with them and give them, share them the idea of what is capacity team. So that they know that, okay, this is your monthly burnout, and typically that's the way they can kind of, look about it. The other thing that we've done is obviously the very clear OPEX and CAPEX rules that are there in the company. We've tried to kind of mold that into which roles would comply with, that kind of a breakdown, right? So, okay, if you're a developer and if you're doing front-end kind of stuff, then you're probably 100% capitalizable. So you can look to do that. So that's the way we kind of, broken down into the roles and said, how do I get this OPEX, CAPEX stuff right? Because when I present my business case, it has all of those elements. Now you're running it in Agile. So how do you meet that, right? So that's one of the ways in which we've kind of looked to say, okay, understand your team structure, break it down, look to see what kind of rules are there, try and map it with your OPEX, CAPEX rules, and see how does those roles fit in. And then you've got an idea. It may not be perfect, but you've got a decent baseline to start that conversation with finance. Because they look, everything heads up, and they need to have that insight and information, which gets difficult at times when you're kind of driving through Agile and kind of doing that. But we're trying to find a solution through capacity and role-based.
I think that's a really smart way of doing it, right? So what you're doing is what you've described there, and a bit like you did with the two business units that you're using the thing, is you're minimizing transformation. Right? You're not trying to transform finance.
That's right.
You're going to take what we're going to do and we're going to fit into the processes that you need us to fit into, and we're gonna like, as opposed to going into a big battle that you may not necessarily win and is going to cause a lot of heartache for people. Just find a way of making it fit.
And we did that. We did the first 1 or 2 meetings, but finance was like, why don't you understand Agile? There's Agile finance, this is Agile finance. And like, this is our rules. And I'm like, okay, fine. We'll have to be creative about finding a way around this.
That's it. And actually, for the most part, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can still deliver value under the old way. Even if you have to do a Gantt chart that just says sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. It's a Gantt chart, right? Your scope isn't described on your Gantt chart, so that's fine. So there's lots of things that you can do that make it look and feel like less transformative, and therefore make the resistance and the inertia in the organization less when you're doing these kind of things, I think.
Yeah, indeed.
We've probably got time for one more question or thought. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just kind of in relation to what you're saying there. We've gone through an agile transformation in various parts of the organization over the past several years. And the IT side, the developer side, embraced it.
Yes.
Excuse me. And then as it moved to the non-technical side, we'll say it was a bit like your agile transformation thing, and the terminology scared people.
Yes.
and also the kind of the 2-week sprint thing. So in my team, I'm in a risk team now. There's non-tech risk and tech risk, and the non-tech risk people are absolutely allergic to if you say sprint or anything. And there's also the risk of over-reporting then. You know, so you're not doing a quarterly report every 2 weeks, but some people feel like you are, and they come with you know, fully armed as such in that regard. And then on the flip side of that, the IT side, there can be delivery for the sake of delivery, and not for value.
Yeah.
And you know, I've seen situations recently where it's like, yeah, we finished phase 1 and now we're going to go on to phase 2, but you haven't built in time to fix the things you didn't get right in phase 1.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yo, let's have the party. And it brought me in mind years ago when I was in just operations support. Myself and 2 of my colleagues were sitting in one line of the one set of seats in the building, and there was a release of an internally developed product. It went out, there was all these emails coming around from VPs and SVPs saying, oh, great job, you know, the development team are great, yeah. Meanwhile, the 3 of us were getting inundated with, this thing is on fire, you know, it's not working, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you have to roll it back. But we got the emails, we can't roll it back, you know, so it was that kind of delivery for the sake of delivery rather than delivery for...
Yeah, it's the story that tells, right? So I think, like we went through this at CPL, and I think I picked probably 50 key stakeholders, and I met them one-to-one, over and over again, telling the same story, asking them and listening to them, and for understanding their concerns about the thing, and being able to explain it in really simple terms that they understood. If you expect anybody who's part of the transformation, but maybe on the edges, to go and become a safe certified practitioner, and that's the only way they can learn about this stuff, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think you have to find ways of explaining that actually we're just going to ask you why. What's the business value for this thing? And I'm just going to ask you to compare it to the other things, right? And just decide which thing you're going to do. So a much softer, but also more human approach to listening to what their challenges and concerns are and explaining things in simple terms that real individual humans can understand. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think, you know, that's exactly the way to kind of, you know, do that. And we're not, you know, beyond just Agile, that's also some of the stuff that we're now practicing with even the AI implementation. I know there were a couple of discussions that we had earlier today about how we're doing it. It's a lot about first understanding what is it that they really want, you know, so breaking it down into, you know, use cases and categorizing those use cases. So the way we're kind of doing it in our company is like, you know, we've broken it essentially into 3 categories. We're talking about, you know, productivity and, you know, efficiency. We're talking about experience, and we're talking about capability. That's the 3 buckets, broad buckets in which we're kind of breaking down the AI
language of the business
to say what exactly is it that they want. And I wish this was more time. I could have talked about our AI journey as well, but it's the next, you know, big evolution that we kind of, you know, look and see how do we bring that to bear in many parts of the business. So we started about 50 use cases, 50, across the company on different areas, touching about HR and what we can look to do. We've got a very big use case of legal that we're kind of looking to drive, and effectively also for patients as well, because how do we better take care of them? Now this is a published one, so I can talk about it, but there's Apollo database program. You can search about it on the internet. It's one of the biggest AI initiatives that Fresenius Medical Care has taken to generate insights from, you know, almost 1.5 million therapies that we've kind of, you know, done for our patients to better understand the journey that they take, and then be able to kind of, you know, have deep learning and AI generated models to say how best to take care of these patients.
Yeah.
When is it that, you know, it's a tipping point that, you know, we need to make certain interventions into these patients as well.
I mean, I think certainly medical care is one of those areas where AI is just blowing.
Yeah, the data
it's fantastic.
We've got a phenomenal amount of data. That's what drives the direction.